What's going on, everyone? I'd like to welcome you back to Drew Kelly's philosophy. Um, I know it's weird to say, but I'm so used to saying welcome back to the Drew Kelly podcast that now every time I say Drew Kelly's philosophy, it's a little different, but hey, I'll get used to it. Anyways, so I'm excited for today. This is officially the first episode of this enterprise that I began, and actually quite excited because today we're going to be covering, for the sake of argument, How to Do Philosophy by Robert M. Martin. Now, this guy is a retired professor of philosophy at, I hope I don't butcher this too much, Dalhousie University, and is the author of many books and so forth and so on. I particularly enjoy this book, which I was assigned to during my first semester of philosophy at Assumption University. I particularly enjoy this book because it's straightforward, it's informative, and it teaches you how to do philosophy properly. Now, yes, if you can do something properly, then there are ways that you can do it improperly. And one of the primary ways to do philosophy improperly is to argue about philosophy, or rather argue about any particular philosophical idea against someone else, and you become angry, or the other person becomes angry. Essentially, if you're arguing any philosophical topic with anyone, you should not get angry. It should be a sharpening of swords, not a badgering of personalities. So keep that in mind every time someone wants to argue about politics or philosophy. In particular, philosophy. You want to stay calm. In politics, it's, in my opinion, more difficult to stay calm. But, and nevertheless, I digress. Okay, so let's review a bit of the introduction. So yes, this book is intended to teach us, the readers, how to do philosophy. Most of what's in here is about arguing, not regular arguing, but philosophical arguing, which is the most basic philosophical technique, arguing. Whereas chemistry and other natural sciences rely on experimentation, philosophy almost exclusively relies on verbal argumentation or paper argumentation in the form of writing papers and replying to those papers with objections. Now, an advice nugget also is keep things super simple. Stick to the point, leave out irrelevancies, and don't fool around. Be straightforward and to the point, and that is another advice nugget from our author here. Now, chapter 1, Truth. I want to take a minute or two to discuss truth because I think it's almost extremely important to come to terms with what truth is. Now, everyone will have their own personal understanding of what truth is, but essentially it's veritas, right? The Latin root, it's truth. Like, what is true? What is factual? What is so, right? What is so? What is true? And so, for example, it is not true that my walls are red. My walls are blue, right? That is true. And so the author writes, actually, you know what? Before I get to this, I want everyone after the podcast, after the episode, or even now, pause and feel free to think about what truth means to you and how you can pursue it, and also what the value of truth is. I think these are important questions to consider. So feel free to pause. Now, the author goes into explaining that there are two types of opinions. There are the subjective, personal opinions, which have to do with opinions like chocolate ice cream is much better than vanilla, or classical music sucks, right? That's the first kind. But the second kind is referred to as beliefs. Now, beliefs can either be true or false. My belief that the earth is flat is false, and that has been scientifically proven. Now, why do we even care about truth in the first place? It's better to have true beliefs than false beliefs. And I'm sure we can come up with numerous reasons why it's better to believe what's true than to believe what's false. Now, the author then writes about what's called bullshit. Now, excuse my language, but if you don't believe me, here you go. See, one of the reasons why I decided to accompany each podcast episode with a video format is because bullshit is now an acceptable term in philosophy. It has been ever since the publication in 2005 of the book entitled On Bullshit by the distinguished Princeton philosopher Harry Frankfurt. Now, bullshit essentially is people who put forth false ideas but do not take proper effort and consideration to make sure that those ideas are in fact true. So it's sort of lazy philosophy. Now, Frankfurt points at postmodern anti-realism, which is a family of views recently infecting the academic humanities, and the central idea of which is that there is no such thing as the facts. There's only what appears to you, coherent with, in fact generated by, your particular ideological, social, economic, gender position. You want to avoid this postmodern anti-realism, basically, which states that you can believe whatever the hell you want to believe, and it's your truth. When you start to get into your truth, and I'm sure we'll cover this in this book, you start to get into this dangerous concept called, so I believe it's subjectivism, or I could be wrong here, but essentially this idea is dangerous because everyone has their own truth, but there can only be one truth for each section of existence that is definitely true. So for example, if I believe that the earth is flat, you need to focus on what's true, not on what's true, not subjectively true, if that makes any sense. Okay, moving along. So, true beliefs sometimes have, for some people, what is called intrinsic value. They are good in and of themselves. So yes, you should focus on what's true for practical purposes, but you should also just appreciate it for its intrinsic value. Now, there are three ways that people view philosophy. The first one is shown by quoting this quote, which is, everyone's got their own philosophy, which is totally not what academic philosophy is, right? And so not everyone has their own philosophy, it's just opinions, right? So that's one way when people view philosophy. Another way, the second popular view of philosophy is that it aims not at truth, but rather psychological benefit, the production of a philosophical attitude, which is one of acceptance or acquiescence or submission or calm in the face of difficulty or disappointment or disaster. Again, academic philosophy is primarily concerned with finding the truth. Now, a third popular view is that philosophy is bullshit. It's idle speculation with no care for truth, and you'll just talk on and on all day without getting anywhere. Not true. So, the aim of philosophy is to produce, quote, the kind of knowledge which gives unity and system to the body of the sciences, and the kind which results from a critical examination of the grounds of our convictions, prejudices, and beliefs. It aims at finding out, for example, how biology does taxonomy, what justice is, when children or cognitively disabled persons might be considered responsible for making medical decisions for themselves, and any of those difficult questions that you seek to ask. What is life? Why are we here? Is God true? Is God real? How do you prove God's existence, right? And it's too bad that universities nowadays are concentrating so much on the most applied disciplines, those who claim the loudest that they're useful, which they mean money-making, to the detriment of the pure sciences and humanities. Because yes, philosophy is a pure science. It has to do with true beliefs and intrinsic value, which if you go to any business person and you say, okay, can you quantitatively measure the value of philosophy, of the study of philosophy? he's not likely going to measure it at all. Whereas if an engineer goes and says, okay, can you quantify the value of engineering knowledge? The business person can. So, in essence, philosophy teaches us to question, to argue properly, and to dig deep for what is true and what is not true. Guys and gals, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Drew Kelly's Philosophy. We're out of time, but I invite you to stick with me because this podcast is going to get quite interesting. Now, if you have any questions or comments or concerns, please feel free to DM me on Instagram at Drew_Cali12. Again, that's Drew_Cali12. And I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Thanks for tuning in.